Welcome to Mondays with Mondane, where we explore topics that shape our lives and communities, especially communities that are marginalized. I'm your host, Edie Mondane. And even more exciting news today is that we're going to be having a conversation with our Oregon District Attorney, Mike Schmidt. Let me introduce the District Attorney to you. In the heart of Multnomah County, Oregon, a dedicated champion for change stands tall. He's a big guy. Mike Schmidt, your District Attorney. Elected by the people in May of 2020 and appointed by Governor Kate Brown to complete the outgoing district attorney's term. Mike officially assumed office on January 1st, 2021. Today, he stands on the precipice of re-election, ready to continue his unwavering commitment to justice, reform, and the voices of the people. Listen. In the face of the daunting challenges posed by the playground to prison pipeline for African American males and the entrenched systemic racism with our jail and prison systems, Mike Schmidt, our present district attorney, has shown me that he stands resolute. As we all know, and I firmly believe this, no government power can act effectively without the united voices of we the people. For what I've seen, Mike is for the people. As he seeks re-election, he invites us to join him in shaping a more just, equitable, and inclusive future for Multnomah County. Together, we can rewrite the narrative of justice, one reform at a time. I'm honored to have with us to our podcast, Oregon District Attorney Mike Schmidt. Give him a hand.
Thank you, Pastor.
Mike, tell us about you.
Oh, thank you. So about me, I grew up in upstate New York in a small little rural community, went to college. My first job out of college, I actually went to the city of New Orleans and became a high school teacher. And that was really my first, I didn't know this at the time, but that was my first taste of understanding the criminal justice system. And some of the things that you've just mentioned, especially as it pertains to the black community. Mm-hmm. All my students were black. And here I am from a small town in upstate New York, very homogeneous, white, small town. So it was my first real taste. I know what it was like for me growing up. We used to, this little tiny town, one little sheriff, he'd be running around and we'd run for him from fun, right? Like if we're at the park too late and he comes out with spotlight us, we go running and it was almost like a game. Fast forward to when I'm teaching in New Orleans and my students' interactions with the criminal system was not a game. Much different experience for them growing up. I remember one time we had a shooting that happened right near the campus, so we were all locked down. And I asked my kids, I said, how many of you here in this classroom know somebody who's been shot? And this is in New Orleans. Every single hand goes up. If you would have asked me that when I was in 9th grade social studies, I don't know that any hands would have gone up in my classroom. And these young people, I was there to teach them about the Wright brothers and Henry Ford and assembly lines and history and all that. And they're just trying to get through their day experiencing violence, being victims of crime, some of them being the caretakers for their young siblings because the parents are out of the home because their parents have been in the criminal system.
Right.
Some of them themselves. I had a student that was arrested, 14 years old, held in solitary confinement all weekend because supposedly he had marijuana on him. Well, that was later proved that he didn't have marijuana on him. The police officers planted it on him and kept my 14-year-old student in a jail cell for the entire weekend.
Wow.
So that was my first eye-opening experience teaching down in New Orleans for 2 years and understanding that this country is not doing the right thing, especially by my students at the time in the black community.
Well, in the black community, did you learn did you learn anything about, they say that white men can't jump. And so, you look pretty tall.
Yeah.
Did you play basketball at all?
Well, I played basketball in high school a little bit, but I was a bench warmer. I didn't hit my growth spurt till I got to college.
Okay.
So now I'm 6'4", but I think I left high school at like 5'11".
So you're proof that black men can't.
White men can't I could not jump. And I did coach a little basketball when I was in New Orleans. And my students could dunk, I could not. So, so that's true. That's true. But so I taught in New Orleans. I did my 2-year commitment. I made a commitment to the community. I teach for 2 years. And then I decided I'm going to go to law school. And that's when I moved to Portland. And I went to law school at Lewis and Clark. And I thought I was going to be an environmental lawyer. Turns out, after they had half of my money for law school, I figured out I don't like environmental law. It's not about kayaking and hiking and suing polluters. It's it's administrative and boring. So I got an internship at the district attorney's office. And then I thought to myself, I can be that person who sees what my students were facing in the system and kind of think about them more holistically and differently as human beings, and how can I help not let them go further into the system. So I started in the district attorney's office with an idea that the system needed to change, and I could be a part of that. I prosecuted in the office for about 6 years, and I ended up leaving because I realized that I couldn't actually change the system. There are little things around the margins here, there you can do, but ultimately I wasn't the one calling the shots. And our laws in that office, the district attorney sets the policies. And the district attorney in Multnomah County not only sets them for the DA's office, but a lot of times the state of Oregon. Because as the largest Multnomah County, or the district attorney's office, they have a large voice. And so I remember being in front of a judge, and we were advocating for the sentencing of a man who'd been in and out of the prison system his whole life. And he was there in front of the judge for burglary. And I saying, "Hey, judge, we need to send this man to prison for 5 years." And the judge just looked at me and said, "Why?" And I didn't have an answer to that judge's question. That judge is named Michael Marcus. He's not with us any longer. But I didn't have an answer to his question. I didn't have a why. I just said, well, that's the law. It's the sentence. It's what's supposed to happen. And he looks at me and he says, "Schmidt, this guy's been in and out of prison his entire life." He was in his 50s at that point. He's like, "What makes you think sending him to prison is going to change this trajectory?" And that was a moment for me. That was a moment when I realized, I think the judge's point was that I wasn't even trying to ask the right questions. Yeah. Which is, what are we going to do to change what is happening with this man? And every time he gets out, there's another victim in our community, because sending someone to prison for a few years and then they come right back out, you're not fixing anything. You're just kicking that can down the road. And so I left the district attorney's office. I went to the legislature. I was counsel for the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. I got my chops in policy. Then I went to the Criminal Justice Commission. And that's where I got to kind of travel the world and see that the United States is an outlier in how we deal with criminal justice. We are the most incarcerated nation on earth, pound for pound, and we are not the safest. So as much as we tell ourselves that the more we can lock people up, the safer we're going to be, everywhere else proves that that is not true.
That brings us, that's a good segue into, in your initial campaign in 2020, you platformed on mass incarceration and what that means. What does that look like right now? And what are some of your ideas or what you're going to put into play coming into this next season to begin down that road of making that change? Yeah.
Well, so when I ran, start campaigning in 2019, no pandemic, George Floyd hasn't been, it was like, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to change some things, right? We're going to work on these issues. And I've been doing that. And we've been setting up some programs. But like you said, change takes time. Yeah. And, there have been some district attorneys around the country that they are like, we're on day one, we're going to, lock the door. We're not going to change. We're going to change the whole system. My approach is more pragmatic than that. I want to see things work because ultimately public safety is what my job is. Yeah. And so I understand that we're going to do things differently, but we're going to prove that it works and keep our community safe. So starting where I did, it was, I'm very idealistic. Then you get to 2020, pandemic, George Floyd is murdered, protests in our city, 120 days. That was really challenging. Yeah. Our homicide rate, stolen cars are up, across the board, just challenge after. And we're not unique in that. Cities across the country have seen violent crimes rise. But it's how do we respond and how do we adapt to that? So I ran to change the system, and we've been working on some things. I'm very proud of our Justice Integrity Unit. Our Justice Integrity Unit recognizes that the system has been getting things wrong for a long period of time. And we make mistakes. But if we're not actively looking backwards to see where we make mistakes, then we're just going to keep losing the trust of the community. We've uncovered, in my first 3 years, over a dozen of wrongful convictions. That people, we actually had a man who was serving time in prison and he was wrongfully convicted. Not only did we uncover that in Multnomah County, we've uncovered statewide dozens of wrongful convictions. And so now we're starting to fix those things, because how is the community supposed to trust us if we're convicting people wrongfully? So I'm very proud of the work that the Justice Integrity Unit is doing, but it's not changing how many people are in prison overnight, right? We're talking about dozens of people when we have tens of thousands of people in prison. I think the state of Oregon, around 12,000 people in prison right now, right? So, but we're working on trying to get the things right and build back that trust that I think a lot of times our system is lost.
How do we do that? I mean, what is two critical pieces of building that trust? And you're intentional. How are you going to look very intentionally, unapologetically, at coming in and saying, we're going to do this and we're going to do this right now? Because some people like to do right now, like me.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's too late.
Yeah.
What are we going to do right now?
Well, I think I do see multiple ways to restore trust. One is we have to take ownership that we've made mistakes in the past, and we have to work to fix those mistakes.
Okay.
That's look back. But look forward, the other way that we need to get trust of the community is to say we're working on our biggest problems that are facing us right now. So gun violence. Really hitting our community, has hit our community very hard over the past 3 years. Auto theft. I was just talking to a member here today about his car was stolen last night. Like these are the things every single day. Catalytic converter theft.
Oh, yeah.
We worked on that. Luckily, not luckily, it's been intentional. We got the law changed, and we've seen a reduction in catalytic converter thefts in our community by 40%. But it takes work. Organized retail theft, hitting our businesses, seeing people as their job, waking up every day to steal from local businesses and then sell these things online and fence these things. So I think also building trust, it's about recognizing the past and trying to make amends and own that and fix it, but also that we're here to work on the actual problems and challenges that are facing us right now. And we're starting to make some progress in those spaces too.
Wow. Police accountability.
Yes, sir.
That's a hot button all over the country. As a matter of fact, it's becoming a hot button all over the world. Right here in our city, what is your target, and where are you measuring your game in terms of making the police, their actions, more accountable? Yeah.
This is so crucial. I think, I talk to a lot of community members, and what I hear from them is not that, we need to, get rid of the police or less police. They want good police. They want police officers who they can trust to do their jobs, who are going to do them well, that will serve the community when the community needs them. So the key is I actually think police accountability in a lot of ways is pro-police, because we have good police officers and the community is assured that the police officers are good. That's good for everybody. And so for me as the district attorney, the standard is the same for police officers as it is for anybody in the community. If you break the law, then we're going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
And the way that I have tried to demonstrate that is that everybody knows for our criminal justice system to work, the police and the prosecution, they work together. I can't prosecute cases where police officers don't make arrests and write reports.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, you can think of us as kind of the pitcher and the catcher, right? They pitch the ball, we're prosecutor, we catch it. We got to work as a team. But when police officers are the person who is suspected of the crime, that challenges the relationship. Now, I've prosecuted multiple law enforcement officers since I've been the district attorney, and sometimes those end up in convictions. We also had one that I'm very proud of. It ended up in a restorative justice resolution.
How so?
Well, so what we did, and this is a case that came out of the protests, a police officer used his baton on a defenseless young woman who was down on her backside on the street.
I remember that.
And hit her in the face.
Yes.
We charged that man with assault in the 4th degree. Now, this is in the context of the George Floyd protests and Black Lives Matter, and people, I think, that took to the streets to say our criminal justice system is failing us. So we talked to that young woman who was the victim in this case and said, what do you hope to achieve? What is your goal? What will help you as the victim heal? And what she really wanted was not necessarily the individual officer, his misdemeanor conviction. She wants system change.
Yeah.
That's why she was there in the first place. And even as the victim of this crime, she recognized that what happened to her was symptoms of the issues. And so I said, what if instead of we go through the prosecution, we do a restorative process? Because if we do the trial and it'll go to trial, it's just going to say protesters versus police. The police are going to feel one way about it. The protesters are going to feel the other way about it. It's going to open these wounds, and we're not going to ultimately get healing at the end of this. We're going to get a lot of people more dug into their positions. And so instead, we entered in this restorative process. The police officer was willing to do it. The victim was willing to do it. They had an outside group mediated this. For months, they worked with both sides until they could get together and have dialogue. And it resulted in the police officer tape recording a video apology to the victim. And that's what she said that she wanted to heal, to move forward. Mm-hmm. And so much of our criminal justice system, we don't actually get victims what they need to heal. We're focused on punishment, and that counts for all types of crimes. Yeah. But when I talk to victims of crime, most of the time, they want to know, why did this happen to me? How can I be sure that I'm safe and it's not going to happen again? And what is the person going to do to change their lives so that they don't victimize more people? Yeah. That's what most victims really, at the end of the day, want to know. But our criminal justice system is set up to not allow that conversation to ever happen. Because the defendant can't answer those questions because they have an attorney that's advising them, don't say that, don't admit to that, don't say that, right? Wow. That's our system. So victims, what they most want is frequently withheld from them in a normal trial setting. So in this situation, we got the victim, the officer together, and I had her and other community members tell me this is the first time they've ever seen a Portland police officer take accountability publicly for their actions and apologize. Mm-hmm. And I just think that hopefully sets a tone that if a protester and a police officer from 2020 can come together and say, you know what happened wasn't right, but I'm going to take accountability. I'm going to stand up and say that. If they can heal, then I think that we as a community can heal. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
That's a big topic, the police and accountability and transparency, et cetera. But even bigger is the homicide. Over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of criticism around what we've been doing to bring this to some semblance of getting better. What do you see, and what is your office planning to do about the homicide rate? It's demonstrative.
Yeah, it's been horrible. It's been really challenging to talk to community members who have lost loved ones. To know that by the time my office gets involved, the act is already over. Yeah. And so we're too late. And so I can go in and talk to family members and express my empathy and my sympathy for their loss, but we're too late at that point. We have to get upstream of these issues. Now, my office, we have a job to do. We need to hold people accountable, and that's what we do. We show up at the scene. So when a homicide happens, we have a deputy district attorney. It goes out. They go out. They work the case right from the beginning because these are some of the most important cases that we handle. Mm-hmm. So that's what we've been doing. But for me, it's not been enough. We need to get ahead of it. So I actually partnered with doctors and epidemiologists from all over the region. Mm-hmm. And we presented to them over a course of 6 months, this is how we prosecute cases. This is what we do. And your doctors tell us, are there interventions or are there things that we could be thinking of as prosecutors that we could do differently that maybe would prevent future homicides? And what came out of that conversation has resulted in a new homicide review commission that is a partnership between law enforcement and OHSU. the health university. So we're now working together to start looking at these cases, just like, I don't know what decade it was, 50s or 60s, when we got the seatbelts in cars, right? It's the same idea. Okay, the accident happened, somebody died in the car crash. Let's back up. What can we do? So we're hoping to look at these cases and say, in the education system, did something go wrong? Could we have done something to get in front of this? In the healthcare system, doctors' interventions, are there things that they could do to talk about gun violence in the home, or give people, make them aware that just having a gun in your house makes exponentially more likely that somebody in your family could have the gun, be used against them or go off and hurt them. What are the things that we can do to prevent a lot of need? One of the things that I'm seeing as district attorney is we're seeing social media be used in a way that is creating a lot of gun violence. People are going online and they're having their beefs online, and then they show up with guns. I also see people who, because they are fearful, they don't feel safe in our community, they're carrying guns on them now.
Yes.
And that is so, I understand it. It's rational, but then you have situations where if you have a gun on you, you're obviously a lot more likely to use it. And we see guns and then alcohol or drugs or other things get mixed, or people just get scared and people end up dead. And we see things that might have used to have been a bar fight end up as a gunfight, because the more and more people that are carrying guns, the more and more they're going to be used. And so trying to think, what can we do to get upstream? The other thing I'll say that I've done, and it just launched this past month, is I've created a homicide unit in the district attorney's office. It's kind
Is there a name for that?
Yeah, so we call it the homicide unit because they will handle every homicide in our county. And it's kind of a sad benchmark, because we've never needed to have a homicide unit in the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, because on average we'd probably get about 30 a year. Well, these past 3 years we've been closer to 100 every year. And so it has just unfortunately become time that I need to create a unit just to handle the homicides that are happening. The good news is that we're seeing them come down. I'm talking to, every month I meet with the chief of police and his team, and of course we have a new interim chief right now, but with Chief Lavelle and his team, and the reports that I'm hearing is that in 2023, the shell casings recovered are way down, the number of shootings are way down, the number of people hit are way down, and homicides are down, not way down, but they're down. We're heading in the right direction. So that's good news, but we have a long way to go to get back to where we were in 2019.
I just buried a niece at 17.
I'm so sorry.
Who was shot in the chest in St. Louis. That was one of the hardest funerals I've ever had to officiate. Given the challenges, talking about health, posed by the COVID-19 pandemic and the public defense crisis that we've seen as a result, how has your office adapted to ensure that justice is served during the backlog of all these things, and how we're moving forward?
Yeah. Obviously, this was an unprecedented circumstance for us. We've never gone through a time where the courthouse has essentially been shut down, trials weren't happening. So we've had to adapt as we've gone. At first, what we were doing is we were charging the cases, but they were essentially not moving. Then because especially the defense attorney crisis, we were holding some of the cases knowing that we were going to charge them later on once we got through this. Well, we haven't gotten through it. It's been over a year. We still don't have defense attorneys every single week getting appointed to these cases. So we're charging all the cases. We're putting them through. And we just know that some of them, when they come into court, aren't going to have a lawyer available for them. And this is such a failure of our system. Everybody knows from watching Law and Order and everything else, you have the right to remain silent. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. This is a bedrock constitutional guarantee by our government that if you cannot afford an attorney, the government will give you one. And we are failing on that front. What happens when we fail on that front is that judges are postponing the cases. They'll hold them for a month or 2 months, and if there's still no attorney, they're dismissing them. And what's so challenging about that is that for us, that doesn't mean we give up. That doesn't mean that the case is gone. That means that we have to bring the victim back into grand jury again. You have to take time off of your work and your job and everything else again to come and testify. Police officers, we got to take you off the street and you got to come in again and testify. Then we get another indictment, and now the police officers have to go and arrest that individual again for the same thing that they already arrested them for. So it's bad for everybody. It's bad for victims, bad for witnesses, bad for resources. It's bad for the defendant, ultimately.
Yeah.
Because what, unfortunately, we're seeing happening all too often is when we can't intervene in a timely fashion, that person gets released and they think, oh, nothing happened. All right. Then they go pick up another case. Then they pick up another case. And we're seeing people come back with 3, 4, or 5 cases, where that first case, had we been able to get them an attorney, push it through the system, we'd probably be talking about drug court or some sort of treatment program. Once you've stolen 5 cars, we're not talking about treatment programs anymore. We're talking about, I'm sorry, you've got 5 cases. This is now a prison case. And we just don't have the treatment resources or anything else to handle you in our community and guarantee that we can keep community safety. So ultimately, because a lot of the things, if you show up at our arraignment court, what you're going to see is a lot of very poor people that are getting arraigned on charges, a lot of very sick people.
Yes.
They're sick with behavioral health, mental health, and addiction challenges. We know, if you got rid of that, I think we'd have only 10% of the crime that we actually have.
Wow.
It is so motivated by those factors. So we know, how do you answer those things?
Yeah.
Well, you got to get the treatment for these people to do those things. We don't have it. And so, unfortunately, what that does is it makes our prison system the default largest addiction and mental health service provider in the state of Oregon.
Hey, it's been a pleasure hosting Oregon District Attorney Mike Schmidt right here with us today on Mondays with Mondene. Be sure to tune in next week as we continue our conversation with our district attorney. Hey, remember to do best, be your best, and act your best for God and your country, and it affect the rest. God bless you. Hey, I've got a real important announcement. I am so pleased to have finished my new book. It's called Maladies to Melodies. It's my memoirs, a story of my life, and all the things that have made me who I am. Listen, it's going to be one of these covers, and I'd like you to help me make that decision. If you like the one that has the piano on it or just my charming face, let us know in the comments so that we can take your choices into consideration. It's going to be available to you in September, and I'm looking forward to sharing my life with you. God bless.
Hey, it's time for you to come to Post Shine. Check out that catfish sandwich. Oh my goodness, is that the shrimp po' boy? Man, look at that chocolate chip cake. Man, I need to get over to Post Shines at 8139 North Denver right now because this food looks delicious. Or call if you'd like, 503-978-9000. And don't miss it, you'll be sorry.
In times gone past, we find ourselves making excuses so that people reminded, ooh, I've got to get home and tend to the brand new business. I need some time alone. Can't just wait until I'm finished texting on my phone.